Hello, everybody. Welcome to Talk About House. I'm Todd.
I'm Juana.
Okay, so as you can see from our background, we're back in our natural habitat.
Yes.
Where we film most of our videos. We did have we were on a river cruise.
Yes, we were.
And a lot of you guessed some things. Someone guessed Amazon, and somebody guessed some other one. But the people who guessed like the Danube and that European waterways were right. We'll go ahead and put up a chart right now that shows you where we went for the whole thing. It was pretty all-encompassing. We were in Romania, Bulgaria, Serbia, Croatia, and Hungary. We have been to 3 of these countries before. We just not had been to 2 of them. Mm-hmm. Serbia and Bulgaria were new countries for us. Of course, one is from Romania, so we spent some time. We got to see relatives that are still there. You got to brush up on your Romanian a little bit.
I did. Had a good time.
And then there were some people who said, hey, you should film some, like a typical house looks like in these countries.
Right. And to be honest, if we would have thought of it, we probably would have done it, but we were having such a good time that we didn't do it. But we were in Croatia a few years ago, and we did do a video of the Airbnb that we had while we were there. So if you want to see what a Croatian place might look like, then go ahead and take a look at the video. Todd's going to put it up right there.
Yep, it's right here.
And take a look. That video went viral. For a brief split second, we were famous.
It got 50,000 views in 2 days.
Yes. So apparently an online publication picked up the video and put up the link, and lots of people watched the video, and we got a lot of nice feedback. We were happy to promote Croatia, and it's a lovely place. If you have the opportunity, we greatly encourage you to visit.
One of the interesting things that we found was that the city of Belgrade, which is the capital of Serbia, it's very quickly becoming a very Western modern city. 10, 15 years ago, it still looked like a communist city, but it's becoming extremely Westernized, very new. Everything's being rebuilt, and the people there look relatively affluent. Which doesn't look, if you look at the rest of the cities on here, except for maybe Budapest, the rest of these cities look like Eastern European cities.
Right, and what's interesting in Eastern Europe is that the rate of home ownership is really high. And they're different than the U.S. because they don't tend to house hop the way we do. They tend to buy a place and stay in it forever. So we thought that was kind of interesting.
We were told that in Croatia it's somewhere between 90 and 95%.
Right. Serbia, same thing, in the high 90s.
Yeah. So they own their homes. They don't play this game where we have. And the other thing, too, is that they tend to be much cheaper. So when they own them, they tend to, no kidding, own them.
Right.
Like they don't a lot of times they don't even have payments. They just own them.
Right.
Okay. With that, that brings us to the article we read that we wanted to talk about. Business Insider. We're entering a brutal new era for the housing market. Obviously, the headline, brutal, caught my eye. I wanted to find out more about it, to find out if it was clickbaity or if it was just there was some good info in here. And then what really caught my attention was the very first sentence in it. If you don't already own a home, you're going to be screwed for years to come. Not in a good way. Right.
So, we've talked about this probably for the last 5 years or so, about every moment that passes, it gets harder to become a homeowner, right? Between home prices, between interest rates, between lack of inventory, the whole affordability thing, it gets harder and harder. We know that, of course, a couple of years ago we had the 3% and sub 3% interest rates, which that was great. However, you had 20, 30, 80 offers on a property. There was a lot of competition, so it wasn't really that great either. And what makes it kind of good is if you're already a homeowner, you're in a good place. If you're not already a homeowner, you're going to be struggling as time goes on because your increase in rent is going to keep eating away at your opportunity to save for a down payment, and it just makes it harder the further along you go.
Here's a quote from the article. The housing market has changed for good, and this does not mean for good for a benefit or something good, positive. It's changed for good, like permanently.
Like for the long term.
For long term. And with the benefit of time-earned wisdom, we can pinpoint the moment it entered a new era. If July 2020 was the make or break moment for the market, we may now be seeing the crystallized new normal, a fraught landscape defined by scarcity of available homes. Borrowing rates have sharply rebounded from their historic lows, and homeowners who feel locked in by the deals they scored earlier in the pandemic call it the housing ice age. There's two deals in here. One was the house they bought when the house crash bros, even as early as 2019, were saying don't buy, the housing market's going to crash. So a lot of people didn't buy. But people who'd bought previously, not just buying the house cheaper, but the fact that they refied. Because we know people that refied like their $1 million home at like 2% change.
Right. Yeah, so people refi, so they have these mortgages that are very affordable, and they're going to be in these homes for the long term.
Okay, here's the next quote. Two big things that happened during the initial response to the pandemic that launched the housing market past the point of no return. First, borrowing rates hit historic lows as the Federal Reserve attempted to stimulate the economy. So Federal Reserve dropped the overnight lending rates to 0. Mm-hmm. And of course, the 10-year Treasury eventually followed. It came to the lowest mortgage rates I wouldn't say ever, but since it was like the early 50s, right? When they had 2% mortgages or 2.5% mortgages, okay? The shift allowed more people to get access to mortgages and dramatically reset buyers' expectation in ways that will reverberate for years. Second, demand for homes surged because of the widespread adoption of remote work and the sudden urge people felt for more space. Chaos pulled forward years of home buying activity, creating a rush for homes that seriously warped the market. Okay, Juan, imagine this. You're a tech worker. You're in San Francisco. There's 4 of you in an apartment with a 4-bedroom, right? House or apartment. You each pay, let's just say $1,000 a month rent. Mm-hmm. And you're maybe not in the best part of town. And that's considered one household because it's any group of people living together is a household. Pandemic happens, you're locked in, you decide, hey, I get to work remote and there's nothing to do in the city, but you could go to Florida, Texas, Nevada, Arizona, Idaho. Mm-hmm. So you just say, I'm out of here. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden you go from one household to 4 households. Mm-hmm. So some of those people rent in other cities, some buy houses. We saw a lot of that, right? People come in here saying, I'm a tech worker, I've never owned a home, I want to buy a house. And they bought a house.
Right. So that takes up all that inventory of homes, and that's part of the reason why we don't have inventory. The main reason we don't have inventory is because people either own their homes free and clear, or people have these fantastic mortgage rates that are give or take 3%, and there's nothing out there for them to buy.
Right. As the dust settles after a hectic few years, it's becoming clear which of the pandemic distortions are going to stick around as long-term trends. Home buyers and real estate agents who grew accustomed to the market running red hot during the first couple years of the pandemic are confronting the challenges that come with a much chiller environment. Higher borrowing rates, fewer transactions, and a dearth of homes that ensures competition for listings remains fierce. Okay, one of the interesting things I noticed, a lot of the guys were making crash videos to scare people into selling so they could take a listing. Mm-hmm. But what I didn't see a huge surge that we were told would be worse than 2006 to 2008. We had 4 million homes on the market and in the U.S. at the peak when back in 2022 at the end of the year, we peaked at 700,000. Less than about a sixth, almost a sixth, basically, of the number of homes. Right. So we had still a pretty low number of homes on the market.
We do. We still have a very low number of homes on the market, and homes on the market are selling. So there are 2 issues with the homes that are not selling. Number 1, they're not priced correctly, or number 2, they're just not appealing to buyers because buyers want to buy. They're not sitting there thinking, oh, I'm going to wait until something happens. People do want to buy. We see it all the time. We see it by the number of people that are on Realtor.com. We see it by the number of people that inquire. We see it all the time, but there's just nothing for them to buy.
Right. Here's the next quote from the article. A busy spring selling season when inventory typically spikes as people gear up to move in the summer hasn't materialized this year. Typically, you'd expect to see about 1 million single-family homes on the market around this time of the year. Simonson told me. Today, there are just over 400,000. In March, roughly 30% fewer properties hit the market compared with pre-pandemic norms. Black Knight, a mortgage software and data provider, reported. And in April, existing home sales were down 23% from last year. That's sales, not prices.
Right. So what does that tell you? It tells you 400,000 properties on the market versus a million, which is what we should have. So a lack of inventory. So we're at less than half of what we should have. We're 23% less transactions than last year because there aren't any homes to buy, because sellers are sitting on homes that they like, and they really like those interest rates.
So Barbara Corcoran did a video a few days ago that went viral where she talked about why you and we're not saying you should buy a house, but I'm just telling you the video she made. And first of all, if you are going to buy a house, it can be a very frustrating experience because there's not much out there. But what she said was people are going to wait till interest rates go back down. But by the time they go back down, everyone will flood back into the market and prices will shoot up. And you'll be you'll be fighting for people, you'll be paying more for a house just to try to save on a mortgage. But if you buy now, you'll get a cheaper price, and then later when mortgage rates drop, you too will be able to refinance. Because if you're waiting for rates to drop, and her whole take was, she lived through the 16, 17, 18% interest rates, home prices were still going up. So people were still buying because they knew when rates dropped, they would be able to refi, which is what people did. Or, Juana, because you weren't in the country then, you were still in Romania when this was going on. But people didn't care because what people traditionally did was every 4, 5, 6 years, they would just sell the house. Mm-hmm. That would refresh the loan. That 16% loan would go away. They would get a 12% loan, and they'd be like, oh, I got a great deal. I got a 12% loan, right?
Right. So, I mean, you can always refinance. The takeaway that I've been kind of thumping on for probably the last 6-8 months is, look, if you're in the market to buy a house and you find that house that checks all your boxes or enough of your boxes, consider going forward and buying the house, because by the time rates drop, that house either will not be available or you will have to compete with so many other buyers that you may not be able to get it. And when the rates go down, 6 months, a year from now, you'll be able to refinance and that house will be more affordable for you. So I'm more a fan of find the right house and make it work because everything else will work itself out, usually, rather than waiting for all the planets to align, because they seldom do.
The next quote, the high interest rate environment is locking out a lot of would-be first-time homebuyers. It's just not affordable at these levels for them given their incomes, Doritas told me. Now, they're quoting people in the article because this isn't the whole article, this is just a portion of it. But even more frustrating, perhaps, is for buyers who are qualified, who even have the cash available. There is just very limited existing home inventory. Even if they want to buy, they just can't.
Mm-hmm. That's basically what I've been saying.
Okay, the next quote. Some aspects of the pandemic-era housing market that once seemed odd are increasingly becoming new norms. Buyers are still bidding quickly on homes they want. More than 20% of homes are going under contract almost immediately. Mm-hmm. Altos Research found in 2022, all cash purchases accounted for more than a third of all single-family homes and condo sales, a 9-year high. According to Adam Data Solutions, a real estate firm, we use both of those in our charts and data you see. We pretty much use Altos, Adam, the census, and the Fred charts, right? The reason it's a 9-year high is because 9 years ago, homes were incredibly cheap. Why were they incredibly cheap 9 to 15 years ago?
Because we went through the Great Recession.
And home prices were super cheap.
Home prices were super cheap. You could buy a home for a lot less than you could build it.
Yeah.
Even without the cost of the land.
Yeah, a ton. Yep. Okay. Here's another big quote. For those who missed out on the past several years of wealth building, the long-term effects could be devastating. We already know that millennials are living with their parents later, delaying typical life milestones such as getting married or having children, and having to wait longer to purchase homes. As a result, they have less wealth than their predecessors did, even though their earnings have caught up to those of previous generations. The steep rise in mortgage rates last year ensured there would be a decades-long gap between those who secured cheap rates earlier in the pandemic and those who will be forced to contend with all kinds of rising housing costs in the coming years. Is the millennials and Gen Z's only chance inheriting a house?
Well, one would hope not.
And if it is, though, they're not going to sell it. They're just going to keep it, probably.
Right. So, no, I mean, look, I think these people are going to get to buy a house. It's just a matter of how long they have to wait to buy it. And again, I don't think it's a matter of money or the interest rates. I think it's a matter of lack of choices of homes that check enough of the boxes.
Right. Okay, here's the last quote. The thing that I think is maybe not changing is the fact that we have people who are in homes now who are locked in for 30 years. Simon had told me, if I've got a 30-year mortgage, I don't ever have to sell that house. Those are generational changes. And a lot of this is because historically, every year home prices went down like 0.5% or 0.25%. So after 4 or 5 years, when you sold your house, you always got the same or a better rate because mortgage rates were coming down from having been 18%. Then they were 10 in like the 90s, and then they were 8 in the early 2000s. And so you didn't care. You carried your mortgage. Then when you sold, and a lot of people didn't refi because they said, "Look, I'm going to sell the house in a year anyway. I'll get a new loan when I sell the house, right?"
Right.
And that's not happening today because it's the opposite. Mortgages rates are much higher.
Right. So there are no refinances for the most part, and people are staying in their homes longer. People staying in their homes longer is a trend that has been kind of in play for probably the last 7 or 8 years. The last figures I saw were that people were staying in their homes over 10 years, which is a long time. And now that people have these fantastic mortgage rates, and now that there's no inventory, I suspect that maybe the next time they pull that data, you're going to be looking at people staying in their homes maybe 12 years.
Yeah, it's a long time. So where does this leave us then? What is the next? Because new home builders, we just did a video on this. They're starting to build more, but the numbers we looked at aren't keeping up with. There's still less than half of household formations.
Right. So new home builders are coming to the market because they see an opportunity, and that's good because we need housing stock.
Yeah.
And that might be an opportunity, depending on your market, to be able to purchase a home that meets all your requirements, and you don't have to deal with multiple offers, and maybe you can get a better rate because it's a lot of times the builder has their own lender, so that could be an opportunity for some people. That's always a choice. Resale is another choice. I just think that on the resale end, you're going to see not a whole lot of choices for some time to come.
Yeah.
So what do you think? What's going on in your market? We want to hear from you. And if you get a chance to watch the Croatia video, good for you. It's a fun video, so I encourage you to watch it, particularly because it's a lot different than homes on this side of the Atlantic. That particular house was, I think, about 500 or 600 years old, and it wasn't that.
Yeah, it was built like this. Yeah, it was 500 years old.
Yeah, it was something like that, and it wasn't that it was anything special. It just happens to be an old part of the city, so that just happened to have been that way. So it's kind of interesting. So take a look. Otherwise, please like the video, subscribe, hit the notification bell, share the video, and we'll see you on the next video. Bye.
Bye.